In the course of that campaign, we even got 50 people to run for the local county committee seat. 25 of them won. It was actually the last act of Governor Core's dying. They said, well, let's change the law so that they can never run this question for 10 years.
And is that specific question?
Yes, and it was retroactive. He broke his promise, signed the law, and so the people of New Brunswick were deprived from having this vote for 10 years.
Hello, everybody. This is CaseStudyQB, and we are in the Progressive War Room with Charlie Kratovil. And basically, the War Room is a place where we strategize. This is open source strategizing, and I want normal people who want to run for office. This is going to be your resource to learn about the ins and outs of it, and we're going to strategize together. So definitely in the comments, I'm going to be checking the comments. If you have any ideas, anything, we're going to do this together. I'm going to introduce my guest for today. I have Charlie Kratovil, a longtime activist who ran for mayor in New Brunswick in 2018 and also started the New Brunswick Today online newspaper in 2011. Charlie, say hi to the people.
Hello, everyone, and hello to you, Case. Thanks for having me. I'm really looking forward to the discussion.
Man, you are a big activist. I checked out your website. You did a lot of things in New Brunswick. So in Middlesex County, one of the things that you did was you end the legal policy of preventing video recording of public meetings. Like, to me, that's common sense in a digital age. Public meetings should be recorded. So I'm glad that you're doing big things over there in New Brunswick. So the first thing we're going to talk about, your experience with elections, because of course it's Progressive War Room. I want to know where you started, how you started out in campaigns, and then also your mayoral race that you just ran.
Sure. And thanks again for the opportunity. I've been doing this stuff for more than 10 years now, and when I look back at it, I feel like there's a lot of lessons learned, and so I'm happy to share them. My first campaign was when I was a student here at Rutgers University. There was a pretty robust movement to change the form of government here in New Brunswick. Unfortunately, still to this day, we have a form of government where all the elections are at large. So there's no neighborhood level representatives. There's no representatives for each ward like we have in many of the cities of New Jersey and many of the suburbs too, honestly. So a group of us actually gathered signatures to put the question on the ballot to change the form of government. We gathered about 1,000 signatures in 2008, turned them in. The city tried all sorts of legal shenanigans and trickery to stop the vote from happening. And, we actually, fought them in court, and the voters were deprived of that vote in 2008. But we got more signatures. We turned in another petition, and we had the vote in 2009. Unfortunately, we lost by about 80 votes out of 5,000. So it was a very close, hotly contested race over those years. But in the course of doing that, we built a whole movement that really challenged the longstanding power structure here. For those of you who don't know, New Brunswick is led by a political machine. The mayor is Jim Cahill. He's been the mayor for almost 30 years now. And before that, it was his cousin, John Lynch Jr., who was famously convicted of corruption.
Wow.
And so between the two of them, this family has controlled City Hall since 1979, before I was born. So we were going up against some really tough opponents, and we were able to successfully build a movement that brought together people from different backgrounds. Of course, New Brunswick, we have a huge Rutgers student community that often is divided from the rest of the city, and we were able to bring people together on both sides of that divide and challenge that power structure, and the machine was really afraid of it. So it was a beautiful experience. In the course of that campaign, we even got 50 people to run for the local county committee seats. They're called Democratic committee seats within the party.
Wow.
Those people who get to decide who gets the party's endorsement. And so we ran 50 candidates. I was the campaign manager. And we had basically a man and a woman in almost every single district in New Brunswick running to represent their neighborhood, and 25 of them won.
Wow.
So we had a real big upset there in our sort of our first chance to get the voters involved. And, unfortunately lost that referendum later that year, but it was a very, impressive campaign. And for that reason, an organization called Food and Water Watch hired me to manage a ballot question campaign in Trenton the next year. And so this was one that was near and dear to my heart. I cared deeply about access to water and having good, well-managed public water systems in New Jersey. We have a lot of areas where private companies have taken over the water system, and the results are not usually good for the residents. And so Trenton was about to sell their water system. Their water system serves 4 towns: Trenton, Hamilton, Hopewell, and Ewing. And Trenton was about to sell the system. That mayor was on his way out after many years, and his last thing was trying to get rid of the water system. And so residents there actually gathered signatures to force a vote to stop the sale.
Nice.
And I was brought in to manage the campaign for the final 6 weeks, and immersed myself in Trenton and learned all about that community, and led that campaign. In that campaign, we were successful. We got 80% of the voters voted against the privatizing of the water system, and it was a huge win for our organization, but also for public water. And so that was a great experience. I a couple years later had the chance to work on another referendum campaign in New Brunswick. Something that we've struggled with is that not only did we have this corrupt political machine running City Hall, but they also had and still have huge influence over the Board of Education. And in fact, the people of New Brunswick had no power to vote in their school board. We did not have school board elections for 100 years or more.
Wow.
And then in 2012, on the 5th try, we finally won and overthrew the appointed system. It used to be that the mayor could pick the school board members himself. And that's what he was doing. And the results were extremely poor. We had a very high dropout rate. Of course, the mayor had other priorities that he put way above the students and the children. And so in 2012, we had a referendum, and similar to 2009, it was close. We actually, that one, we won by about 100 votes. And that was in 2012. So it was a presidential election year, huge turnout.
How many attempts did you try to do this?
So a lot of it predates my time here, but since Mayor Cahill got in 1991, there were 5 attempts.
Oh, wow.
Overthrow the board, the appointed board.
What do you think got you over the hump?
There were a lot of things. I think part of it was that it was a presidential election, so a lot of people were coming out who were not part of the typical machinery. Just people who were coming out maybe only once every 4 years. Oh, hey, there's a question on the ballot. Do I support school board elections? Sure. Whereas some of the folks who might be more deeply embedded in the the patronage machine could shoot that down in a year when there was a lower turnout. So that helped at the big turnout. But also, I think people were fed up with how bad it had gotten, the graduation rate being so low, the sort of deprioritization of the schools here was something that was very palpable. And so we ended up winning. We ended up getting more votes to change the system, and then we started having school elections every year. So after that, I've gotten involved in some of those campaigns, supported candidates that I like. Unfortunately, the mayor's people have won every election since we started having them, but we're getting closer, and we've had some really good candidates run. And generally speaking, the more candidates run, the more people vote, and the better the discussion is and the better the outcomes are. So I'm really glad that we won the right to have these elections, because it was like a really almost impossible fight without the elections.
Now, do you think this holding the mayor more accountable, to the point where he has to run his own slate of people for the school board, do you think that helps improve the school system? Because now he knows, okay, I have to make sure the budget is a certain size. I have to make sure the graduation rate starts to go up, because otherwise my slate of people might get thrown out. You think that has its effect?
It absolutely has had some positive effects. I know the Board of Ed has done some good things since we won this fight. They've also done some very bad things, but every time they do a bad thing, they know that it's going to cost them. They're going to pay a price. If they want another term on the Board of Ed, they're going to have to submit to the voters. And if they've not done right by the voters, it's going to be harder for them to keep that seat. And so I think there is a check on them that was not there before, and it was a real problem. So I'm glad we were able to fix that, and I'm hopeful that New Brunswick will always have the right to vote for our school board. I think every every community deserves that.
Man, I really love your activism. I really love the nitty gritty, how local this is, because whenever I talk politics with my political junkies or overall, I'm really looking at the news from a national scope. And I guess, I don't know if it's not exciting enough to, get into the nitty gritty, but, everything you just described to me is so important to making sure your water system is not privatized and all these, making sure that the wards, I didn't even know about, the different system of the wards in New Brunswick, and you tried to overturn that. Is that something that they're still trying to do, change that political system?
Funny you should mention that. We, in some ways, our biggest accomplishment was we got them to pass a state law in 2010. It was actually the last act of Governor Corzine. And it's a disaster because it was designed solely to stop us in New Brunswick from putting the question on the ballot. We had, again, came very close to overthrowing the system, changing the form of government in 2009. So what they did is, instead of addressing their own problems and why that was happening, they said, well, let's change the law so that they can never run this question for 10 years.
And is that specific question?
Yes. And it was retroactive, going back to the 2009 election, specifically to make sure that we couldn't run our question again. They said, if you ever have a question that you want to change to a ward system or from a ward system, it used to be you'd have to wait 3 or 4 years before you could run the question again. They said, change it, make it 10. And they passed it, and it passed by one vote in both houses. Governor Corzine said he would veto it because it was a very, controversial, bad move, anti-democratic move. Yeah. He said he would veto it, and then, with just a few minutes left in his term before Governor Christie took over for him, he broke his promise, signed the law. Wow. And so the people of New Brunswick were deprived from having this vote for 10 years. Now, this was 10 years ago.
Okay.
This year, I was gathering signatures and trying to get this question back on the ballot. And, the machine heard about it, and they put in their own petition for their own sort of weak reform that really doesn't do anything to address the concerns, but prevents us from getting our question on the ballot this year. So there is a question on the ballot to expand the council from 5 to 7 members, but nothing about wards. And we're essentially prevented from having that question on the ballot until this question is resolved. So, funny you should mention that. The fight continues, and we're not giving up. It's actually something that goes back even further. They've been trying to do this since the 70s here in New Brunswick, and basically every 10 years it doesn't work out for one way or another. But the closest we ever came was 2009, and we're going to keep at it.
So my question, if I got it right, you can't put it this year, 2020, you can't do it because of something that they did?
Yeah, it's basically, you can only have one charter change question at a time. So if there's 2 groups that are circulating petitions to put a question on the ballot, whichever one turns in a valid petition first gets it. So we were racing to get ours done in the wintertime, and they were racing to get theirs done, and they got theirs done first.
Okay, we're getting real New Jersey. This is the last New Jersey question, and we're going to move on, I promise, because I'm from New Jersey, and I really hope to build some collaboration with my guy Charlie here. But our governor, could he have done something to stop that? Like, my impression of our governor right now, I didn't vote for him. I vote for, I believe, the Green Party person. But I'm very impressed of how he's fighting the establishment Democrat on the millionaires tax and other different things. So he actually might win my vote his next election. So, but I want to know, this is something I want to know as a voter, and it might determine my vote. Could he have done something to help with this? Or?
Well, I wouldn't expect him to. I know that these issues of local governance are typically the type of things a governor would steer way clear from and not take a side. I also know he is, rather close with the current mayor, so I would not expect him to do anything to buck that system. But I will credit where credit's due. He has advocated for some really important good policies, and it's definitely an improvement over the last guy, which is not saying much. But I have my critiques of Governor Murphy. I wish he would do more to help the students here in New Brunswick who are on the brink of losing their school. I do respect his willingness to challenge some parts of the establishment on some issues that he cares about, and he's definitely made some real progress on those things, like the millionaires tax.
Basically, in the comment below, I want you to let me know of any local policies that you might know about in your particular town. Let us know what town you're from, and let us know, even if you're from another country, anything local that is an issue. I'm very curious to know what's the main thing going on in your particular town. So for example, in Charlie's case, he helped make sure that the water company was not privatized. So let me know in the comment below.